welcome to another Wargame review from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And today we're taking a look at a game that's called 1918, Brother Against Brother. And this is from Linden Lake Games. And this is up on Kickstarter right now. It's a Finnish game, and this is about the Finnish Civil War in 1918. It was fought between kind of the Red Guard, kind of the communist faction, and the Civil Guard, which was the more, I don't know if you would say democratic faction, but the kind of the Republican faction, so to speak. And they get support from the Germans later in the campaign, and the Red Guard are constantly getting help from the Russians, getting those armored trains in, which is really fun.
Filthy Russians.
Yeah. This is a point-to-point war game. Mm-hmm. So you've got a lot of different towns and cities and strategic points on the map. Those are linked by roads or railroads. And that's how you're going to move. Moving on the railroads is better in this game. It's winter. The railroads will maintain better. The roads are kind of hard going.
And there are more railroads than there are roads.
Yes, and that's just historically
a condition
the infrastructure was better for those. And it's a case of World War I era Civil War. So you're lining up kind of stacks. There's some attritional warfare going on, and your units are 1 or 2 strength, and you've just got a stack of 3 of them, and you're going up against someone else, and it's trying to slog it out. And the Reds are trying to keep and defend these strategic cities, and the white players trying to go in and just take them all, basically. It's a card-driven game, so you'll have a hand of cards, and you'll choose to either play Ops, to move and fight with troops, or play an event, which will break the rules of the game, and you do fun, extra cool things. So it was a really, really fun game to play, very unique. I've didn't know anything about the Finnish Civil War, frankly.
Right.
So learned a lot playing it, because all the events have good history written on them. And what's something that you enjoyed about the game itself?
Well, I think first off, I would say that the design of this game is very clean.
Yes.
I don't believe there's anything that's going to trip you up. If you are a connoisseur of CDGs, this one's going to feel very, very comfortable.
Yep.
I enjoyed the card play. I enjoyed the historical text on the cards. In fact, many of the events coincided specifically with maybe certain characters that were involved in the Finnish Civil War. Once again, I didn't know much about that, but the one gentleman that said so-and-so's drinking problem distracted the Finnish command, I thought those kind of elements were very cool, and they were paired with events that were very appropriate for that character.
One that was interesting is you played an event that was an offensive led by Major Clown, and then I had ones which was Major Clown's reprisal, so to speak.
Right.
And that spurred my guys to fight harder because they didn't want to have reprisals from the event that you played, which I thought, it learned a lot playing the game, thought that was really neat. But yeah, like you said, very clean design.
Very clean. The only thing that really honestly tripped us up in any of it was, and because this is a prototype, there's probably still some translational issues going on. We read a couple of the words and we were like, did that really mean what it said? Remember the one where it said on the defense when it should have been on the attack? And it was very clear. But other than that, I really enjoyed it. It was very fast playing, I thought, for a game of this. There were 5 rounds, 7 cards in the first round, right?
3.
Three in the first with 8.
8 in subsequent.
So, I mean, you played about 35 cards.
And you might not. We played all the way until May.
Right.
And you
could end the game before that.
And very, very probable April. I was very fortunate to drag the game out an extra month.
Yeah.
But at the end of May, it's definitely over.
So I think very quick playing. I think this can be played once you know the rules in less than 90 minutes. Probably 75 minutes to 90 minutes. I liked the map. I thought it was well presented. I thought the graphics were great. Very clean counters. I think they're very nice looking. I liked the different units, the Jaeger units that I had as the White Guard, the German units that came. Really liked those differences. And then you had the armored trains, which was pretty cool. I felt like while the onus was on the White Guard to attack, I don't know that it really is that hard for them to attack, other than the CRTs are really punishing to attackers, which I think is cool. I think it's thematic of the time and the era. You could get in some trenches and some fortifications and really do some damage to the attackers. But I felt like it was more difficult for you as the Reds to win. And maybe I'm misunderstanding that, but I felt like when I got that third strategic town, I felt like it was almost inevitable for me to get the fourth and the fifth because it had become so attritional and because I had kind of worn you down to the point where you had very little and I had very little.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just, I would like to see this at a second and a third play once we get a better feel for the sides to see how it turns out differently.
And what I enjoyed is that it is a World War I era game, and we'd settled into a pretty significant battle line that was extremely attritional, and it was fight, defend, defend.
Yeah.
I'm just like
move recruits up,
moving up all the reinforcements I could to just guys fall, bring them up.
Yeah.
Guys fall, bring them up. It felt very attritional, but then the game, there comes a point, in April where the Germans invade by land and just basically cut you off from behind, and your battle lines will just fall apart.
Yeah.
And so you get into this desperate fighting retreat to hold on to Helsinki, and then what is the other town? Viipuri. Probably saying that horribly, but it was really, really fun when things just, like, everything turns on a dime and it falls apart. You're like, just desperately trying to not die. It was fun.
It was. The other thing I really liked, the strategic side of the game, there were times where I had to ask myself, is it wise to move in and occupy a space, or was it wise to hold back? And the reason I asked myself that was because of roads. Mainly because of roads, ironically. If I had to force you to attack across a road, gaining that -2 modifier, damn, I was going to move in every time. But if I had to attack across that road,
you're like,
I would kind of hold up and kind of say, I'm going to force you to come to me.
Yes.
And I liked that choice. I also liked the concept of your reinforcements came from the number of strategic towns, and you got the most in the first round, right?
Yeah, you get a ton as the war's declared.
I think you added like 12 guys.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
and just
holy
flood
crap.
the map with my guys. And after that, it drops significantly.
It cuts in half. And then I learned, and I think the first move in almost every turn for the White Guard is going to be to take Ulu.
Yeah.
I think that is important, vitally important to take so you don't get those 4 recruits. So I liked that strategic side of the game. I really had to ask myself, what am I doing to try and prevent you from being able to do, or to force you to do? And I liked that choice. I thought that was very well designed.
Yeah, I had a good time with balancing where I'm putting my reinforcements, how I'm going, because I'm on the defensive most of the game.
Yeah.
But that being said, I did not feel like I was being crushed the whole game. I felt like I had a good fighting chance for most of it. Some games you just feel like getting wailed on, and that's not very fun as a defender. I didn't feel that way at all.
No.
And I felt there were some times where I could have punched through and done some counterattacks, but I was too much of a wuss. But bringing in the reinforcements feels so good. Just to you've thrown guys, make a great attack, and I'm just like, got more guys. Right. That was just so much fun. But the combat was quick and simple. Really simple.
Yeah.
You don't get bogged down in tons
You
of
count
stuff.
up your attack power. You look for any modifiers attacking across a road or cards that were on the table. And then you roll a die. You roll 1 die. You consult this table, and we'll look at this a little closer when we look up. But you roll a die, you consult it, and you're like, oh, I did 3 losses. Then you would roll as the defender. Oop, I did 2 losses. And you're like, yay, because now I get to force you to retreat.
Yeah.
If the attacker ever does more wounds or reductions to the defender, they have to retreat. And that can be very strategic and important, because if they have nowhere to retreat to, they die.
Yeah.
And I think a couple of times I took out a couple of your units because I would attack from both sides.
Yeah, you get a good pincer going.
Yeah.
I have, you might only do 1 wound, but everyone else has to surrender because there's nothing else, there's nowhere for them to go.
So once again, I think some of those strategic elements were really captured in the design, in addition to the fun and kind of chaos that come with the cards.
Yes.
I also really liked the cards that you would play and they would sit out in front of you.
Yeah, those are really good.
Some of them were, play this card in front of you the next time, or you can choose when the Red Army attacks me to say, oh, you are automatically a 1 on your attack die.
Yeah, that one was
which
killer.
Basically that means you're not going to take any wounds.
Yeah.
Or it's going to give you a -2, or it's going to give me a +2 to my defense roll. Those were powerful because I had to think twice looking across the table. When am I going to use that, and when am I going to attack, because I know you've got that.
Yeah.
That was cool.
Yeah, I enjoyed those a lot. So what we'll do, we'll take a look at the map, kind of show you everything, how it works, and then we'll come back to wrap up, okay? So here's a look at the map, and this is kind of the end game of what our game looked like. As you can see, it's so you got a map of Finland over here, and you'll have Russia over here. You got the rest of Scandinavia up there. There's a turn track, which is very simple. It's just kind of 5 boxes with the months. There's kind of some reminders here. In February, the Red Guard get the armored trains. And in April, the Civil Guard, the white player, they get kind of German reinforcements that come in from the ocean and can land amphibiously. There's a very small kind of map key over here, which tells you strategic towns, regular towns, ports, roads, railroads, and then this big red dotted line, which is the initial front. And typically that's important because when you get reinforcements, they have to come on your side of that initial front. Even if you've got all the way down in here, or if the Reds are up here, your reinforcements can only come at your initial starting point. Outside of that, the map has got an attack chart, a defense chart, and then a small sequence of play here as well, and some little helpful hints for special, unique situations and the kind of the special units that you have in the game. Outside of that, it's a kind of a very typical point-to-point map. So the squares are normal towns. These kind of star forts are these strategic towns. Those are the ones that you're really looking for. These are your supply sources. These are the victory conditions. And these are, this is where the majority of the fighting is going to be in and around those towns, which is really cool. Each town's got these big, some of them incredibly long names. I'm not going to do any pronunciation of anything other than Helsinki, because that's the only one I know I'm pronouncing at least reasonably well. These blue towns are the port I want to call them hexes. These are port towns, these blue squares. And Helsinki's blue as well, if you look down here, and you can kind of see, it's hard to see on the camera, it's ever so slightly different shade of color. But they also have these anchors. These are the ports at which, in April, when the Germans land amphibiously, they'll come on, you get to, come in on those places down there. But outside of that, these black lines are roads, and the red hashed lines are railroads. And I thought it was interesting, moving on the railroads costs 1 movement point, moving on the roads costs 2 movement points. So it's easier to move by rail than roads, because back in 1918, apparently the road network was very, it was much more rudimentary than you'd expect, so it was probably a lot of dirt tracks. And this is the winter, so it was probably very, very poorly maintained at the time. But the railroads, which would typically, a lot of them, at least the rolling stock, were controlled by the Reds, and that's why in this game the Red Guard have all of the armored trains. And thematically speaking, all the railroad workers would have been on the side of the Reds, as it's kind of, workers and industrialists revolt and unite, and they're kind of part of this Red Front being supported by Russia at the time. So they've got all the rolling stock, they're churning around with their armored trains, trying to fight off the Civil Guard. So that bit's really cool, get some cool theme in there. But basically, it's a very typical CDG. So you've got your hand of cards, like you can see here. Each card has an ops value. You can use that to do ops, or each one has an event, and they have good history on them for each of the specific events. Always love that in the game, especially a game where I'm not necessarily the most well-versed. Frankly, didn't know anything about the Finnish Civil War before I played this game. Before I spoke to the guys at Linden Lake Games. The pictures here are historical photos. Again, I always love that. Just helps bring out the theme, bring some real history, some real feel to the game of what things were like. Shed some light on the sacrifices that were made, the things that were done, and makes that a bit more of real feeling theme. It brings it to life more, and I just love the history part of these games. Again, you'll choose between ops and doing the event. Events, you just do what it says. It usually breaks the standard rules and lets you do extra cool things. But the ops, as opposed to a lot of other CDGs, are very, very simple. If I play this card, it's got a 3 op value. I can activate 3 towns. And basically, I just say, okay, if I'm the red guys, I can activate this town with dudes in it, this town with dudes in it, and this town with dudes in it. You'll move them. They have a movement value on the counters. So we'll just pick these up here. Each of these counters, this is the red guard here. If we can get them in focus, there we can. Attack value on the left, movement value on the right. Very simple. And we'll pull out, let's see, we've got, these are the armored trains. They are very, very strong. The civil guards are the same, so they're just kind of, these are opposites. Very attritional in nature when they fight. The white player has these Jaegers, which are also very powerful, and then they get support from the Germans, again, very, very powerful. And the Germans have a lot of other rules, which the Reds have an incredibly hard time fighting the Germans, because the Germans are so well trained. But basically, when I activate, I can use all my movement value, so I've got 3 moves. Again, costs 1 to move across a railroad, so you can move quite far. It costs 2 to move across a road, so I can move 2, and then if I wanted to move here, I couldn't, but I can move here. So things can get very slow in certain points of the map and on certain things that you want to do, but you'll almost always want to try and go around things to follow the railroads to maximize your movement capacity. That leads to some towns being strategically incredibly important, and you can kind of, the Russians, the red player can get a lot of help with railroads coming up from Russia, and if the white player can cut those ties, they can isolate, huge numbers of troops on a peninsula, and things go very, very poorly for the Reds in that way. So again, even the movement gets a lot of cool strategy in it, but those ops, you move 3 dudes and you attack with those dudes. That's it. There's not a ton of extra options that you can do. A lot of games have, do I build things? Do I move things? Do I attack with things? Do I influence things? This is the mechanics of this are very simple. I just move with them and attack with them. That costs me 1 action point, typically speaking. An attack is very simple to resolve, and you'll do a lot of them, so you get used to it very, very quickly. You just add up your attack values. These two have, so we've got 4 attack, and they're going to attack these little whites here, and they have a 3 attack because one of theirs is reduced. And you just look on the tables up here. The attacker had a 4, they roll on the 4 column, you roll a d6, I'll roll a 6. Best possible outcome. The enemy's going to take 2 wounds. The enemy's going to roll, they had 3, they'll roll in the 3 defensive column, and they rolled a 3, attacker's going to take 2 wounds. So we actually trade 2 wounds each. A wound, so the wounds you'll have a standard here. So one wound's going to flip them to a reduced side, and the other one's going to remove them. So they'll lose a guy, and we'll lose a guy. The battle is a stalemate, so nothing else happens. If the attacker inflicts 1 more wound than the defender inflicts, the defender has to retreat. So if that was the case, this guy's going to retreat. You can advance after combat and take that space if you have full strength units on the board still. If you were only reduced, you couldn't advance in. So again, hit allocation is important there. Obviously, if you've got your special armored trains, you want to keep the hits off them and keep them as healthy as possible, because it's almost impossible to repair those. But some of these results have a red asterisk on them, kind of in the very meaty parts of the charts over here. Those force you to take hits on your special units, so armored trains, Germans, Jaegers, those kind of things. The really cool part of the game is that these are not equal tables. The defender has more opportunity to inflict wounds than the attacker. And you think, it's 1918, the tactics were slightly more rudimentary, the weapons weren't as good. It was also the middle of winter for a lot of the Civil War, January, February, March time. So the going was very tough, and setting up a defensive perimeter around a town was much easier to defend than going in and attacking. So there were some really neat situations that came up. But really, the only other thing to talk about, I guess, is the cards themselves, which we took a look at earlier, but if you look, they have months on them. And this is somewhat similar to Paths of Glory, where, you know, in January you have the January cards. In February, the story progresses, so to speak. So you add your February cards in and shuffle those. Once it gets to March, you add your March cards in and shuffle those. So I know Twilight Struggle is very similar. You get those mid-war cards and the late-war cards. So you want to try and use up your events as much as you can to help you get the better, you know, later war cards to kind of help you out in that way. So there is some incentive to use those events. But all in all, I had a blast playing this. It was really fun, and we'll just wrap up with some final thoughts here. So that was a look at the map and kind of most of how everything works. Again, it's a very clean CDG. With the cards, none of the cards hurt you. So it's not one where you're struggling to like, it's not damage mitigation in your hand. So you don't have that extra level.
Where you're worrying about, if I play this card, it's going to help my enemy. I like that this didn't have that.
That helps keep the game playing really quickly.
And a little simpler, I think, in some ways.
Yeah, so, you know, this would be a good, maybe not introductory, but very next to introductory. Yeah. You know, take a step up from some of the other games you might have played. But yeah, that keeps the game quick as well. I feel like when we play Labyrinth or Twilight Struggle,
it's going to be a 4-hour game.
The analysis is just like, sit and look at my hand for 10 minutes each time I have to play a card, because I'm like, how do I not screw myself? This one you don't do that. It's like, okay, how many ops do I need? Which event do I want to do? Great.
And there's sometimes I want that 4-hour nail pulling, you know, agonizing. But this is going to fill a niche where I just want to play for an hour and a half. I want to have some fun, and we want to try to outmaneuver each other.
Yeah. But, so and to me, anytime you've got a game with stacks of counters, with CRTs, and even just a couple modifiers that you have in this, those are the games where I don't want the hand management as much, because I know that this is where that adds that time, and I get my meat from the actual the tactical boards and the combats, and the cards is just a facilitator for that.
Right.
If you had that as well as, you know, cards that were hurting yourself, you'd be in for a much longer game, and I think this shines because it's quick, it's simple, the units are almost. All your red cards are identical, so you don't have to memorize all the different things. You just move around. It plays very quickly.
I agree. The only thing I didn't like, and this is a difference that Alexander and I have, there were 2 cards that I played that fully benefited me, so it's interesting that I didn't like them, but they were cards that really, outside of the framework of the game, kind of say, oh, you're going to get to remove 3 units in a box. Now, you had to meet some conditions. I had to be adjacent to you, and it had to be, you know, it wasn't as easy as it sounded. But man, those cards are such devastating.
Yeah, it was just remove my whole stack of dudes from the board.
Which you had built that stack up to prevent me from doing what I did. Yes. So I was able to very easily walk in there. That facilitated the capture of the 4th strategic town fairly simply, Helsinki. And then I was able to move on and focus on Viipuri and win the game ultimately. I know you like that because you like the historic integration of those events.
Yeah, it's not that I love it.
Yeah,
I loved it because I was just getting screwed twice in a row. But and I can see why you might feel a little cheap, but because there is history behind it, that helps keep the game realistic. Where
that's true.
And it was those are late game cards, and they come out, and it's, you know, the red guard collapses, and historically they lose. And so I don't mind it as much because of this. You know, if that was like in February and it's just like remove a guy and you were unable to just like cut everything in half, like that would have been crippling. But it's late game, so I did not mind it as much.
I understand that. I just, if I was in your position, I'd have been like, oh, I just worked 5 or 6 rounds to get that, and it's like, poof, it's gone.
Yeah.
But that's a minor quibble. I think that's, your comment to me was, well, I know that could be in there, so I can prepare for it.
Yeah, next time I'm playing, I'm like, all right,
yeah, you're gonna look
he's
for
got
it.
those cards, so then it's that extra level of strategy the next time we play.
CRT was awesome. I really liked the punishing, the more difficulty for the attacker. Thought that was great. Really liked it. Was clean, quick, fast playing. I think my only comment was those couple of events. The components are excellent. For a prototype, these are excellent components. Beautiful counters, great looking cards, lots of history. Rules were pretty upfront and straightforward.
Yep.
Like the setup card, I thought these were very good.
Yes.
Because it was very clear. The problem is we had to search for probably 20 minutes because we're not familiar with the landscape of Finland, where this city is, etc.
And some of the names are quite long, and in some of the lake and river districts, they kind of cross over some of them. So some of it's a little bit difficult to read, but I think they'll kind of fix that. Just minor graphical thing, but the setup was not terrible.
No.
And once you've done it a couple times, like, okay, here's where these go, here's where those go. Not bad. But yeah, the reinforcement schedule was easy. Not a ton of stuff to do. I thought this was a very easy, very playable game.
Yes.
So this is 1918, brother against brother. So it's the Finnish Civil War, and it's close of the First World War. So you get that attritional nature within the combat. Great CDG. Had a blast playing this. Feel free to back this on Kickstarter. I know that's up right now. And this is from Linden Lake Games. We've been theplayers8.com. I've been Alexander.
And I'm Grant.